Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Sunday School Review. This week's Sunday School lesson is entitled The Faith of David, and it's taken from 1 Samuel, the 17th chapter, verses 31 through 37, and verses 45 and 48 through 50. Of the first Samuel. Now, the book of Samuel, the author is unknown, but the book of Samuel talks about the life of Samuel, that is Israel's last judge, and the reign and decline of Saul, Israel's first king. And it also talks about the choice of David as Israel's second king, second and greatest king. Now, the characters in our lesson today is David, Goliath, and Saul. Now, when we look at chapter 17 of 1 Samuel, we notice there in the first three verses there, verses 1 through 3 of the 17th chapter of Samuel, we see that the Philistines are in control. They are in power. And that the Israel is fighting a war against the Philistines. So we find that in the first few chapters. And we also find somewhere, let's see, around about the 17th verse in the 17th chapter, where David is one of the sons of Jesse. He's the youngest son, and David is a shepherd boy. He's a boy. And his brothers are fighting in this war against the Philistines. And Jesse, the father, sent him to give supplies, to take supplies to his brothers. Okay, we find that around about the 17th verse. And before we go there, that's in some of the verses that we around maybe 4 through 8, somewhere there. What this Goliath, what was suggested is that instead of the two armies fighting, that we send a man from each side. In other words, a one-on-one winner-take-all battle, and to fight, and whoever wins will serve the other. If Israel win, the Philistine will serve them, and vice versa. So we have this Goliath, which is a giant, a proven warrior, Philistine warrior. He stepped forward and issues a challenge. Now, he's a giant. He's a proven warrior. He offers a challenge to Israel to send up a man that's willing to fight me. And we go down. Let's see, around about the 22nd verse is David. As David was visiting his brothers, he heard the challenge. He heard the challenge, and that this Philistine made. And let's look at 24. Verse 24 says, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, that is, when they saw Goliath, this giant, fled from him and were afraid. And 23 says, and the men of Israel, in other words, all of Israel was afraid of this man. No one wanted to step up and fight this man. Now, as I said in verse 22, David, by being around there, he heard the challenge. And let's look at 26. And this is David asking a question here. He said, David spoke to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth the Philistine and taketh away the reproach of it from Israel. In other words, it was reproach. They were being reproached because nobody wanted to step up and fight this man. And this is what David said. It says, who is, this is 26, the latter part of 26, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the army of the living God? This is what David said. Now remember, David is a boy. He's a little shepherd boy. And he hears a challenge, and who is this uncircumcised Philistine that defies the army of the living God? Okay, he wants to know. And let's go down. Our lesson takes up, and it starts in verse 31. So David hears about this challenge, and then let's go to 31, where our lesson takes up. We have two outlines. The first outline is a fixed fight, and it's 31 to 37. Let's read 31. And when the words were heard which David spoke, okay, David said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? They rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. So Saul is the king. Saul is the king. He was the first king of Israel. Saul was the king. Saul heard this, and he sent for David. Okay, 32. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Now David was a boy, basically. The reputation of this giant, this warrior, and Saul is looking at David. Now he's looking at him from a natural standpoint. You know, he's like basically saying, "Are you serious?" And let's go. What are we at? 33. Saul said to David, okay, this is Saul speaking. Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. In other words, this man had been a man of war from his youth, and you just a youth. As I say, are you serious? This is a man of war, proven. Now, this is 33. Now here is 34. That was 33. This is 34. Here's where David is going to recite his past experiences. Let's go to 34. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept thy father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he rose against me, in other words, the lion turned against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. 36, thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them. Okay, in other words, I will do to this uncircumcised Philistine like I did the lion and the bear. Okay, but let's read 37. David said, moreover, the Lord delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. Now, David caps it off. He talks about his experience, but he caps it off by saying that the Lord. So David, confident and faith was in the Lord, was in God, not his own abilities now. This is faith in action. He was confident. He had confident faith that the Lord would deliver him out of the hands of the Philistine, just like he delivered him from the lion, was able to slew the lion and the bear. So David was not confident in his own abilities, but he had confidence and faith in God that God would deliver him. As it said in verse 37, again, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And the last part of 37, and Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. So Saul gave David permission to go and challenge this Philistine. As I said earlier, as we read in verse 24 and 25, all of Israel was afraid of this man. All of Israel was afraid of this man. Okay, and David said, I will go. I will accept the challenge because his faith was in God. His faith was not in his abilities, in his military abilities. His faith was in God. So that's the first outline, a fixed fight. So it was a fixed fight. It was God's fight. It wasn't, David wasn't relying on his ability. Just like the Lord delivered him from the lion and the bear, he will deliver me from this giant, this Goliath. And David stepped up and accepted the challenge because he had faith and confidence in the God of Israel. Let's go to the second outline. The second outline is verse 45 of the same chapter, verse 45 and verse 48 through 50. And it's entitled A Confident Expectation. A confident expectation. Okay, let's read 45. Then David said to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. So Goliath was relying on his military experience, whereas David was relying on God. In other words, David had God on his side, but this giant had the military backing. He had his military experience. So what do we have is God versus Goliath, basically. And you can guess who's going to win. So that's what David, I come to thee, in verse 25, I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. Let's go to verse 48. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, and David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. In other words, David ran to him. David wasn't backpedaling. David ran to him. And all David had was a stone and a sling. One hit. Let's read 49. And David put his hand in his bag and took hence a stone and slang it and smote this Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face on the earth. One hit and he falls. One hit and he falls. And verse 50, so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. All David had was a sling, or we call a slingshot, and a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. So we see here, as we see, David had faith in God, and there is nothing, we see there is nothing too hard for God. And this is an example for us today. We have difficult circumstances in our lifetime, in our life, or we might call them, we have Goliaths in our life. And just like God delivered David from the lion and the bear, just like he delivered him from this Philistine, God can deliver us from our Goliaths that we have in our life if we have faith in him. That was the key that David did. David trusted in God, not his abilities. Not his ability. He trusted in God. He had faith in God. And this is the lesson we see. Faith in action. David was relying on God. Trust. That's the key. Keep trust in God. He will deliver. Don't trust in your own might, as David did not. He did not trust in his own might. David was confident that God was with him. And this is our lesson today, the faith of David, faith in action. And we like to thank you for watching. We ask you to join us next week for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Thank you.